Hi, this is Jessica with CutesyCrafts.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this easy finger knit blanket. You don't need any knitting needles or crochet hooks. All we're going to be using today is this really neat loop yarn, and it's nice and soft and it makes a beautiful blanket. And yeah, all you need is this yarn, your hands, and a pair of scissors. For a good size throw blanket about 50 by 60 inches, you're going to need 7 skeins of the loop yarn. So first you want to count off the number of loops that is going to make the width of your blanket. For my 50 by 60 inch blanket, I counted out 70 loops across, and that's not including, you need to leave 2 extra loops at the end. And I will show you what we're going to do with those. Oh, that one already came apart. But each of the loops is held together by a piece of thread in the middle here. So all you need to do is take a pair of scissors and snip right in the middle, because you want a nice little tail about that long. So that's usually just 2 loops for the tail, snip 2 of them, and then go ahead and count out 70 loops if you want to make a nice size throw. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to count out 10 loops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then it's a good idea, you don't have to, but I found it helpful to take a safety pin and mark that last loop, especially when you are dealing with counting out 70 loops. You want to make sure that you remember which one you're supposed to be on. So that's going to be your first row. And then you're going to take all of your yarn, move it to the other side of the blanket, and kind of pull this yarn this way. And the next row, we're going to do what is called a knit stitch. And this is the easiest stitch for you to do. All you do is take this next row and you're going to take the loop and pull it through the loop from the first row. So the second row of loops here is coming from the back, and you're pulling it up through the first row. So again, back row loop comes through the first row. And you need to make sure as you're doing this, especially the first row, it's going to get a little bit wonky. Make sure that everything is straight, none of your loops are twisted, and make sure you're pulling those loops through all the way. And definitely for the first few rows, you want to do this on a table or on the floor, not sitting like on the couch. All right, so once you've gotten through that row, you're going to I like to take the bulk of my thread, move it to the other side of whatever I'm working on, and then you're going to do the same thing. So again, the knit stitch is pulling this new row of loops through the back of the previous row of loops. So I pulled that through the back, pull this one, and make sure you don't skip any loops or you'll end up with a hole or a gap in the blanket. So this was our knit stitch. Now we're going to switch off to doing a purl stitch. So for the purl stitch, I take the bulk of my yarn and I'll move it across the work, but you want to bring it to the bottom. That's going to make it just easier for you to sort everything out. So my new row of yarn, I'm bringing in from the bottom, and you want to take the next loop, and instead of pulling it up through the bottom of our previous row, we're going to take the new loop and pull it down through the top of this loop. So take this loop, pull it through this way. Take your new row, pulling it down through the bottom of the previous row. And then just continue that along the row. So you can see how that leaves kind of a ridge on this side. That is what created the border on my blanket. So I did 2 rows of the knit stitch, and then I'm going to do 2 rows of the purl stitch. So again, we're just coming in with our new row, bringing it through the top of our last row. And I want to show you really quickly before we move on, to create this border that was consistent around the entire blanket, I actually switched off when I got to each end here. So this is the knit stitch all the way across for the first 2 rows. And then I did the purl stitch along here, but the last 2 loops here are the knit stitch again, because I wanted the knit stitch to be all the way around the blanket. So knit stitch, a whole row of knit stitch again, a row of the purl stitch, but 2 knit stitches at the end, another row of purl stitch with just 2 knit stitches at the end. And then for the entire rest of the blanket until I got to the very end and I was almost finished, I did the knit stitch for every row except for the 2. So I left 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches here at the end. So these 2 are going to be purl stitches, and then 2 more knit stitches. You don't need to do this. If you want to just do the whole thing in knit stitches, that's totally fine. Or you can do the whole thing in the purl stitch if you like that better. Either way is totally fine. Now say you've run out of yarn or you want to start another color. If you're at the end of the row, I will show you how to do that. You want to leave 1, 2 loops at the end and then just snip in between those 2 loops. And then, just like we did at the beginning, go ahead and snip in between the loops to release them. And then you'll have a tail there. And just go ahead and keep that like that for now. And then at the end, we will go back after the blanket is finished and weave those ends in. And I've got my new color that we're going to bring in here, and just like we did previously, we're going to snip open 2 of the loops on the end to leave a tail. Lay this new row out above your work, and just like we were doing before, bring the new yarn in from the back to the front through the previous row. Super easy. And just leave that tail on the right side here, and we will weave that in later. So again, we just continue with that yarn. We'll bring it across to the other side. So now say that you're going along and you want to switch colors in the middle of a row. I've done a few stitches here, and now I'm going to stop here. So leave 2 loops again, snip that off, snip open the 2 loops like always, and then we're going to bring in our other color here. And I've already made a tail on this one by snipping 2 of the loops. And so we stitched through this loop, and now we are going to continue stitching with the purple on this loop here. So then just continue down, and you kind of want to take these tails here and just tuck them in the back, and we'll save that for later. All right, so say you're ready to stop now. Your blanket is finished. You want to leave 2 loops at the end, snip that off, make your tail, and we're going to take the loop on the opposite side, and we're going to take the loop next to it, so the one to the left here, and we're going to put it through the first one on the right and pull that up. So this was our loop that was on the left, this becomes our new loop. So it's kind of like a crochet move. We're taking the loop on the left, put it through the one on the right, and then this one is our new loop that we're using. So continue that along the line, left through the right. You can also do it the other way if you happen to end on the other side. Doesn't matter. Just make sure you're opposite the tail that you left. And then you should end up with this nice braided look on the top here. And we have our last loop here that we need to secure. So take the tail, thread it through the loop here. Now you can just kind of like weave this tail back in on the back under some of the stitches, but I like to make it extra secure, and I don't know if I'm breaking any knitting rules doing this, but I'm gonna tie a knot. Maybe that's the embroiderer in me that likes to tie knots, but I feel like with this fluffy yarn you can get away with it and you can't really see it. So I've tied a knot there to secure that. And now we need to take care of all of our loose ends. So we turn the blanket over, and remember how we did a color change right here? There's going to be kind of a gap here. So what you're going to want to do is tie a knot. I like to tie a double knot there, and that's going to make it so you don't have that gap in the back. But then we still have this string here. So all that you have to do then is just take your extra bits of yarn, and I like to follow the same color so you can't see it as much. And again, we're working on the back of the blanket, and pull that up a little bit and thread the yarn under. And again, we're gonna go over a stitch, take the yarn, thread that under. If you want to make this a little bit easier, you can take a crochet hook, push that through one of the stitches, and then it's going to make it easier to grab the yarn on the other side, and then just pull that through. Not necessary, but I did find that that makes it a lot easier. So do that about 3 or 4 times, and then this one I'm going to take the opposite direction. And then once you've done that a few times, you can just go really close to the blanket, being careful not to cut through any of your stitches, and just cut off those ends there. And then we're going to do the same thing with all of these other ends that we've got. These pieces at the end, there's no need to tie knots for these ones. These ones are already pretty secure and there's no gaps or anything. Oh, and just to show you what happens when you skip a loop, look at that right there. I skipped a loop. So to take care of that, I am just going to weave that under some of these extra stitches. And thankfully this fluffy yarn helps that disappear quite easily. And then once you get all your loose ends woven in, you shouldn't be able to see anything, and everything should be nice and secure. And you've got yourself a nice, cushy, cozy blanket for these cold winter days. So I'm going to teach my 10-year-old how to do this, and I'm thinking that maybe she might want to make some scarves for her friends for Christmas or something. So it's a good teen or tween craft, but also fun for me as an adult to do and have something to do while I'm sitting watching TV. Super relaxing and a really easy and fun project to whip up. I hope you enjoyed this blanket making tutorial. Head on over to my blog, cutesycrafts.com, for more fun craft ideas.